Something just happened in the WNBA, and it's already creating serious tension. A major announcement involving Caitlin Clark has just dropped, and not everyone is happy about it, especially not Angel Reese. Fans are noticing the reactions. Social media is exploding, and the debate is getting intense. Because this isn't just about one announcement, it's about recognition, it's about respect, and it's about who really deserves the spotlight in today's game. Angel Reese has built her own name, her own impact, and her own following. So when news like this hits, people start asking questions. Is the league favoring one star over others? Is this fair? Or just hype taking over? And now, with Reese's reaction making waves, this story just got a whole lot bigger. Let's break it all down. The moment the announcement dropped, the reaction was immediate. It didn't take hours. It didn't even take minutes. Within seconds, fans were already sharing, reacting, and debating what it meant for the league. Because anything involving Caitlin Clark right now is never small. She's not just a player. She's one of the biggest names in basketball today. Every move, every performance, every update connected to her carries weight. And this announcement, it was big enough to shift the conversation instantly. At first, it looked like a positive moment, recognition, opportunity, another milestone in what has already been a highly watched journey. Fans celebrated, posts started trending, highlights resurfaced, supporters pointed to her performances as proof that she deserved it. And for many, that was enough. But then, the other side of the conversation began to grow. And because whenever one player receives major recognition, people start asking about everyone else. Who was left out? Who deserved consideration? Who isn't getting the same attention? And that's where Angel Reese entered the conversation. Not quietly, but as a central figure. Because Reese isn't just another player in the league. She's a star in her own right, a champion, a personality, a competitor who has built her own following and presence both on and off the court. And more importantly, she's been part of the same wave of attention that Caitlin Clark helped create. Their stories are connected. Their rivalry dates back to college. Their matchups have drawn massive audiences. Their names are often mentioned in the same conversations. So when one rises, people naturally look at the other. And that's exactly what happened here. Or as the announcement continued to gain attention, fans began comparing. Stats, impact, visibility. Every detail became part of the discussion. Some argued that Clark's recognition was completely deserved, pointing to her influence on the game, her performances, and her ability to draw attention at a level rarely seen before. Others pushed back. They argued that Reese's contributions were being overlooked, that her impact, both as a player and as a personality, was just as important to the league's growth. And that maybe, just maybe, the spotlight wasn't being shared equally. That's where the tension started building. Because this wasn't just about one announcement anymore. It was about perception, about how the league values different players, even about whether attention is being distributed fairly, or whether certain narratives are being prioritized over others. And in today's sports world, perception matters a lot. Because fans don't just watch games anymore, they analyze everything around them. Who gets promoted, who gets featured, who gets talked about the most, and those details shape how players are viewed. Meanwhile, Angel Reese's reaction, whether direct or indirect, became a focal point. Because when a player of her level responds to something like this, people pay attention. Every post, every gesture, every subtle signal. Fans started interpreting everything. Was she frustrated? Was she responding to the situation? Was this about respect? And just like that, the narrative expanded. Because now it wasn't just about the announcement, and it was about how players were reacting to it and what those reactions meant. At the same time, media coverage picked up fast. Sports shows began discussing the situation. Analysts started comparing the two players. Headlines framed it as a growing tension between rising stars. Because that's what drives attention. Rivalries, contrast, debate. And this situation had all three. But here's what makes it even more interesting. Because beneath all the noise, there's a deeper layer to this story, a layer that goes beyond individual players, beyond one announcement, beyond one reaction. It's about how modern sports create stars, how narratives are built, and how quickly those narratives can shape the direction of the game. Because in today's world, talent alone isn't the only factor. Visibility matters, storylines matter, And the way players are presented to the audience matters more than ever. And that's exactly why the situation feels bigger than it seems. Because it's not just about Caitlin Clark, and it's not just about Angel Reese. It's about how the league is evolving, and who stands at the center of that evolution. And now, with reactions growing and the conversation expanding, one thing is clear: this story is just getting started. As the announcement continued to dominate headlines, the conversation started shifting in a very specific direction, from celebration to comparison. Because in modern sports, recognition is rarely viewed in isolation. When one player rises, fans immediately look around and ask, who else deserved this? And that question brought Angel Reese even deeper into the spotlight. Not just as a competitor, but as a counterpoint. Because Reese isn't just relevant, she's impactful. Her presence on the court is strong. Her personality off the court is even stronger. And her connection with fans is undeniable. She represents confidence, energy, and identity in a way that resonates with a huge audience. And that's why this situation hit differently. Because for many fans, this wasn't just about celebrating Caitlin Clark. It was about questioning whether Reese was being given the same level of recognition. That's a powerful debate. And once it started, it spread fast. Social media became the battleground. Posts comparing stats started trending. Highlight reels were shared side by side. Fans created threads analyzing impact, influence, and visibility. And some argued that Clark's influence on the game, especially in terms of viewership and attention, made her the clear choice for major recognition. They pointed to sold-out arenas, rising TV ratings, the Caitlin Clark effect that has been talked about everywhere. From that perspective, the announcement made sense. But others weren't convinced. They argued that Angel Reese brought something equally important to the league: energy, personality, cultural impact. They pointed out that Reese connects with fans in a different way, a way that expands the audience and brings new voices into the game. And from that angle, the conversation wasn't about who is better. It was about balance, about whether the spotlight is being shared fairly between two of the biggest rising stars in the sport. And that's where things started getting intense. Then, because debates like this don't stay neutral, they turn into sides. Supporters of Clark defended her recognition strongly. Supporters of Reese pushed back just as hard. And suddenly, what started as a simple announcement became a full-blown discussion about fairness, media coverage, and narrative control. Meanwhile, Angel Reese's reaction, subtle or direct, kept fueling the conversation. Because in situations like this, even small signals matter. A post, a caption, a reaction. Fans analyze everything, and every detail becomes part of the story. Some interpreted her response as frustration, not necessarily anger at Clark, but frustration with the way things are being presented, with the idea that one narrative might be overshadowing others. Others saw it differently, and they believed Reese was simply staying confident, standing in her own lane, continuing to build her own brand and not letting comparisons define her. But regardless of interpretation, one thing was clear: her presence in the conversation was undeniable. And that's what made this situation even bigger. Because now, it wasn't just about one player receiving recognition, it was about two players representing different aspects of the same movement. Clark representing performance, range, and a new level of offensive excitement. Reese representing energy, dominance, and a strong cultural connection with fans. Both are important, both are impactful, and both are shaping the future of the WNBA in their own ways. But when attention feels uneven, that's when tension appears, and that tension isn't necessarily negative. In fact, and in many cases, it drives growth. Because rivalries create interest, debates create engagement, and engagement brings more eyes to the game. That's exactly what's happening here. More people are watching, more people are talking, more people are choosing sides. And while that might seem like conflict, it's also momentum. The kind of momentum that pushes a league forward. But here's where things start to get even more complicated. Because as the debate continues, it begins to influence perception, not just of the players, but of the league itself. Fans start forming opinions about how recognition is given, about who gets promoted more, about who becomes the face of the game. And those opinions can shape long-term narratives. Because once fans believe there's imbalance, they don't just forget it, they remember it. They bring it into future conversations. They apply it to future situations. And that's why this moment matters. Because it's not just about what's happening right now, it's about how it influences what comes next, how future announcements are received, how future players are viewed, how the league manages its growing spotlight. Meanwhile, both Clark and Reese continue to do what they do best: play, compete, perform, because at the end of the day, that's still the foundation. No matter how big the narrative gets, the game itself still matters most. But even as they focus on basketball, the story around them continues to grow. And with every new reaction, every new comparison, every new debate, the tension builds. Because this isn't just about one moment, it's about a rivalry that's evolving in real time. A rivalry that's being shaped not just by games, but by perception. And that's what makes it so powerful. Because when perception meets performance, that's when sports create moments people don't forget. At this point, the situation had clearly moved beyond a simple announcement. It had turned into something much bigger. A conversation about identity, recognition, and the future of the game itself. Because when fans start comparing players like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, they're not just debating stats. They're debating value. What matters more? Is it scoring ability? Is it influence on viewership? Is it personality and cultural impact? Or is it a combination of all three? That's the real question driving this entire situation. And the answer isn't simple, because both players bring something completely different to the table. Caitlin Clark's game is built around skill, vision, and range that stretches defenses in ways that feel almost unreal at times. Her style is exciting, it's fast, it's made for highlights. Every deep three-pointer becomes a viral moment. Every assist turns into a clip that spreads across social media. And that kind of play naturally attracts attention. But Angel Reese brings a different kind of impact. Her game is physical, dominant, emotionally charged. She controls the paint. She brings intensity. She connects with fans through her confidence and personality. And that connection is powerful, because sports aren't just about what happens on the court, they're about how players make people feel. And Reese has mastered that. So when this announcement placed Clark at the center of attention once again, and it didn't just highlight her success, it created contrast. A contrast that fans immediately reacted to. Because in their eyes, it wasn't just about one player rising, it was about whether another player was being overlooked in the process. And that's where the conversation became emotional, not just analytical. Because once emotions enter the discussion, things change. Debates become stronger, opinions become more personal, and the narrative becomes harder to control. Meanwhile, media coverage continued to amplify everything. Segments weren't just discussing the announcement anymore, they were framing it as part of an ongoing rivalry. Clark versus Reese, a matchup that started in college and now continues at the professional level. A rivalry that isn't just about basketball, but about storylines. Because storylines are what keep fans engaged beyond the game itself. They create anticipation, they build tension, they make every future matchup feel bigger than usual. And right now, this storyline is one of the biggest in the league. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Because as the conversation grows, it begins to influence how both players are perceived moving forward. For Caitlin Clark, the spotlight becomes even brighter. Every achievement gets amplified. Every performance is expected to match the hype. Because once you're placed at the center of attention, there's no stepping away from it. The expectations only increase. And that's a challenge in itself, because maintaining that level of performance under constant scrutiny isn't easy. For Angel Reese, the situation creates a different kind of motivation. A sense of something to prove, not necessarily against Clark, but against the narrative, against the idea that she might be seen as secondary in a story where she believes she belongs at the center too. And that kind of motivation can be powerful, because athletes often perform at their best when they feel overlooked, when they feel like they have something to show, something to reclaim. And that energy, it can translate directly onto the court. Which means this situation isn't just influencing conversations, it's influencing competition. Because the next time these two players face each other, it won't just be another game. It will carry everything that's been said, debated, and discussed leading up to it. Every possession will feel more intense. Every moment will feel more important. Because fans won't just be watching the score, they'll be watching the story unfold. And that's what makes this situation so powerful. Because it turns regular games into must-watch events. It turns players into central characters in an ongoing narrative. And it turns the league into something bigger than just competition. It becomes entertainment. At the same time, the WNBA finds itself in a unique position. Because moments like this bring attention. A lot of attention. And attention is what every league wants. But managing that attention, that's the challenge. Because the league has to balance multiple things at once. Promoting stars, maintaining fairness, encouraging competition, and making sure that no player feels overlooked in the process. That's not easy, especially when the spotlight is growing this fast. But it's also an opportunity, because if handled correctly, this kind of situation can elevate the entire league. More rivalries, more storylines, more engagement, all of it contributes to growth. And right now, growth is exactly what's happening. But growth always comes with tension. Because as the game expands, so do expectations. From fans, from players, from everyone involved. And this moment, as intense as it is part of that process. A process of defining what the league is becoming and who stands at the center of that future. Because one thing is certain. This isn't just about one announcement anymore. It's about a rivalry that's shaping the next chapter of women's basketball. At this stage, the situation wasn't just trending, it was evolving. See, because what started as a reaction to one announcement had now turned into something much more complex. A layered narrative involving performance, perception, and power within the WNBA. And the deeper it went, the more questions it raised, because fans weren't just debating players anymore, they were starting to question the system itself. How are stars created in modern sports? Who decides who gets the spotlight? And is that spotlight being shared fairly? These questions didn't come out of nowhere. They came from watching patterns. Watching how certain players are promoted more heavily. How certain highlights are pushed more aggressively. How certain narratives are repeated more consistently. And right now, Caitlin Clark is at the center of one of those narratives. A powerful one. The face of a new era. The driver of attention. Now the symbol of growth in women's basketball. And while that narrative is supported by her talent and impact, it also creates tension. Because when one narrative becomes dominant, others can feel overshadowed. And that's where Angel Reese enters the conversation again. Because Reese represents something equally important, but different. She represents energy, identity, connection with a broader audience that may not have been fully tapped into before. Her presence isn't just about stats, it's about culture. And culture matters, because sports don't grow through numbers alone. They grow through emotion, through personality, through players who connect with fans on a deeper level. And Reese has that connection. So when fans see one player receiving major recognition while another seems less highlighted, they don't just see a difference. Might they feel it? And that feeling turns into conversation. And that conversation turns into pressure. Pressure on the league, pressure on media outlets, pressure to balance narratives in a way that reflects the full scope of the game. But here's the challenge. Balance is hard, because attention doesn't always distribute evenly. It follows momentum. It follows virality. It follows what captures the audience fastest. And right now, Caitlin Clark's style of play, her deep shooting, her fast pace, her highlight-heavy moments, fits perfectly into the modern media ecosystem. It's built for clips, built for sharing, built for instant impact, and that naturally drives more visibility. But that doesn't mean other forms of impact are less valuable. It just means they're different, and that's where the tension lies. Not in who is better, but in how different types of greatness are recognized. Because the game isn't one-dimensional. It's layered. It has multiple styles, multiple strengths, multiple ways to influence outcomes and audiences. And ideally, all of those should be represented, but in reality, some rise faster than others, and that's what fans are reacting to. Meanwhile, as this debate continues, something else is happening behind the scenes. The rivalry is growing, not necessarily through direct conflict, but through contrast. Clark versus Reese isn't just about competition anymore. It's about identity. Two different styles, two different energies, two different ways of impacting the game, and that contrast makes every interaction between them more meaningful. Because now, every matchup feels like more than just a game. It feels like a statement, a chance to prove something, a chance to shift the narrative, even if only slightly. And fans can feel that. That's why anticipation is building, because people aren't just waiting for the next game, they're waiting for the next chapter of this story. How will Reese respond on the court? How will Clark continue to perform under the spotlight? Will the dynamic between them change or intensify? These are the questions driving engagement right now. And engagement is exactly what the league needs, because moments like this, as intense as they are, bring attention. They bring conversation. They bring new fans into the space. But again, it all comes back to management, because attention can build or it can divide, and the difference depends on how it's handled. If the league leans too heavily into one narrative, it risks creating imbalance. If it spreads attention too thin, it risks losing focus. So the goal becomes clear. Elevate multiple stars, build multiple storylines, create an environment where different types of greatness can coexist and thrive. And right now, that process is happening in real time. Through moments like this, through debates like this, through rivalries like this. Because this isn't just a controversy, it's a transition into a new phase of women's basketball. One where attention is higher, expectations are bigger, and every moment carries more weight. And in that kind of environment, even a single announcement can spark a movement. But here's the key question moving forward. Will this moment create division, or will it create something even bigger? Because the answer to that will define what comes next. As the debate continued to spread, something subtle but important began to happen. The energy started shifting, not away from the situation, but deeper into it. Because now, people weren't just reacting emotionally, they were thinking strategically. They were starting to look at the bigger picture, and that bigger picture raised one major question. Who really benefits from all of this? At first glance, it might seem like this situation creates tension between Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark, but if you zoom out, you start to see something different. Because moments like this don't just create division, they create attention. And attention is the most valuable thing in modern sports. Think about it. More people are talking about the WNBA right now than ever before. More debates, more engagement, more eyes on games, highlights, and players. And that's not a coincidence. It's the result of moments like this. Moments that spark conversation. Moments that pull fans in, even if they weren't paying attention before. So, while the debate might feel like conflict on the surface, underneath, it's driving growth. That's the paradox of modern sports. Controversy can divide opinions, but it also brings people closer to the game. Because when people argue, they care. And when they care, they watch, they follow, they stay engaged. That's exactly what's happening here. The Clark versus Reese narrative isn't just a rivalry anymore. It's becoming a central storyline for the league, a storyline that keeps fans invested, that makes every matchup feel important, that turns regular season games into must-watch events. And that kind of energy? It's rare, very rare. But here's where things get even more interesting. Because while the league benefits from this attention, the players do too. Both of them. For Caitlin Clark, the spotlight continues to grow. Every achievement gets amplified. Every performance reaches a larger audience. She becomes not just a player, but a symbol of the league's expansion. For Angel Reese, the situation creates a different kind of opportunity. Visibility. Because even when the conversation starts around Clark, Reese is part of it. Her name is mentioned, her impact is discussed, her presence is felt, and that keeps her in the spotlight as well. That's the dynamic of rivalries. They don't just elevate one player, they elevate everyone involved. Because attention doesn't stay in one place, it spreads across players, and across teams, across the entire league, and that's exactly what we're seeing now. But here's the key difference between short-term attention and long-term impact. Sustainability. Because attention can spike quickly, but maintaining it, that's the real challenge. And that's where everything becomes more complex. Because now, the league has to build on this moment. It can't just rely on one announcement, or one debate, or one rivalry. It has to expand the narrative, create more storylines, elevate more players, give fans more reasons to stay engaged beyond a single comparison. That's how growth becomes sustainable. At the same time, players have to navigate this carefully. Because while attention is valuable, it can also be overwhelming. Every action gets analyzed. Every word gets interpreted. Every performance gets compared, and that kind of pressure can be difficult to manage. So the challenge becomes balance, staying focused on the game while operating in an environment where everything is amplified. And that's exactly where both Clark and Reese find themselves right now, at the center of something bigger than just basketball, a movement, a shift, a moment where the game is evolving in real time. But here's the most important part of all. Because while fans debate, media analyzes, and narratives grow, the game itself keeps moving. Games are still being played, wins are still being earned, careers are still being built, and eventually, performance takes over again. Because no matter how big the conversation gets, basketball still decides everything, on the court, in real time, under pressure. That's where narratives are confirmed, or challenged. And that's where players prove themselves, or redefine themselves. And that's what makes this situation so compelling. Because it's not finished, not even close. It's still unfolding, still evolving, still building towards something bigger. Because the next time these two players step onto the court together, everything we've just talked about will be part of that moment. The debate, the comparisons, the expectations, all of it. And that's what turns a game into an event. But there's still one final piece to this story, because beyond the rivalry, beyond the attention, there's a bigger question waiting to be answered. What does all of this mean for the future of the game? At the end of all the debates, reactions, and rising tension, one truth stands out above everything else. This isn't just about Angel Reese. And it's not just about Caitlin Clark, it's about transformation. Because what we're witnessing right now inside the WNBA is bigger than any single moment. It's a shift in how the game is viewed, how it's consumed, and how it's valued. For years, women's basketball has been building, growing step by step, season by season. But moments like this, they accelerate everything. They bring attention faster. They create conversations louder. They push the game into spaces it hasn't fully reached before. And that's exactly what's happening now. Because whether people support Clark or support Reese, they're watching, they're engaged, they care. And that level of engagement is what changes a sport. But with transformation comes tension, because growth isn't always smooth. It comes with questions, with comparisons, with moments where people feel like something isn't balanced. And that's what this situation represents. Not just a disagreement, but a growing pain, a sign that the game is expanding faster than ever before. Because when a league reaches this level of attention, everything gets magnified. Recognition becomes more important, visibility becomes more competitive, and every decision carries more weight. That's the reality now, and both players are at the center of it. For Caitlin Clark, this moment reinforces her position as one of the most visible athletes in the game. Every achievement places her further into the spotlight. Every performance strengthens the narrative around her. But with that comes responsibility to deliver, to perform, to justify the attention that surrounds her. Because once you become the face of something, there's no stepping away from it. For Angel Reese, this moment represents something different. A challenge, not necessarily against Clark, but against perception, against the idea that recognition might not fully reflect her impact. And that kind of challenge can be powerful, because athletes often perform at their highest level when they feel they have something to prove. When they feel like they're being overlooked, they respond with energy, with intensity, with performances that demand attention. And that's exactly what makes this situation so compelling, because it sets the stage for what comes next, not just in conversation, but in competition. Because eventually, everything leads back to the court. That's where narratives are tested. That's where debates are answered. And that's where players define who they are, not through opinions, but through performance. And when that moment comes, all of this attention will be focused in one place, on the game itself. But beyond the players, this situation also defines something important for the league. Because now, the WNBA is at a crossroads. Not in a negative way, but in a powerful one. It has attention, massive attention. Now it has to decide how to use it. Does it build around one central star? Or does it expand the spotlight across multiple players? Does it lean into rivalry? Or does it focus on balance? These are the decisions that will shape the future. Because this moment isn't just about today. It's about what the league becomes tomorrow. And that's what makes it so important. Because if handled correctly, this isn't just a viral moment. It's the beginning of a new era, an era where women's basketball reaches levels of popularity, engagement, and influence that were once considered out of reach. But if handled poorly, the momentum could slow, the attention could shift, and the opportunity could fade. That's the balance. That's the challenge. And that's exactly where the league stands right now. But here's the most important takeaway of all. Because no matter what side of the debate you're on, no matter who you support, one thing is undeniable: the game is growing. Faster than ever before. More people are watching, more people are talking, more people are invested. And that's what matters most, because at the end of the day, sports are about connection, about moments that bring people together, about stories that keep fans coming back. And right now, this story is doing exactly that. So yes, Angel Reese is reacting. Yes, Caitlin Clark is being recognized. Yes, the debate is intense. But the bigger picture is that women's basketball is entering a new level, a level where moments like this don't just happen. They define the future. And this moment, it's just the beginning. So what do you think about this situation? Is Caitlin Clark getting the spotlight she truly deserves? Or is Angel Reese right to feel like the recognition isn't being shared fairly? Drop your thoughts in the comments right now, because this debate is just getting started. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the biggest stories in basketball. We're covering everything: rivalries, controversies, and the moments that are shaping the future of the game. Share this video with your friends, and let's see who really understands what's happening beyond the headlines. Because in today's sports world, it's not just about the game, it's about the story behind it. Hashtag Caitlin Clark, hashtag Angel Reese, hashtag WNBA, hashtag basketball debate, hashtag sports drama, hashtag WNBA news, hashtag women in sports, hashtag viral sports, hashtag basketball fans, hashtag sports talk at WNBA, at ESPN, at Bleacher Report, at SportsCenter, at NBA.